never ending, bro. There's just so much news before the game's even out. So patch notes came out, and I don't know why I didn't realize it originally, why they wouldn't have patch notes. Of course they would. They need to balance all the stuff out and all kinds of stuff, like new Mio. That's cool, but we're just gonna go over the big important points, and if you want to see all the actual details and read it yourself, I'll leave a link in the description. So first up, Mio is going to be here at launch. She's going to be a light animus. She's going to be support. Already went over her a little bit, so we can glaze over that, but she will be in the general pool. The new SR, remember she was a win, so a defensive supporter with some counters. We kind of went over her briefly. Guild Wars are going to be starting about, what was it, 2 weeks? 2 weeks after launch, so look forward to that. You do have to be guild level 6, so if your guild is relatively active, I'm sure that's pretty easy to hit. They already showed off the other event before, but here we have some little draw machine to get some Chaku skins. This is probably going to have some kind of a paid aspect to it because there's a bunch of little skins. I like how they're in little like pop figurine boxes. And this one, if anybody knows what this is, I don't remember Anti-Sync Echoes at all, but Anti-Sync Echoes now includes exclusive Lingluo story content and unlocks challenge groups 10 to 12. I don't remember what Anti-Sync Echoes is or if I participated in it at all, but yeah, I'd like to know what that is. So again, we already went over the limited banners having their pity drop down. They're talking about adding in ban protection for the regular RTA at Diamond 1 and above. I don't remember if this was already a thing, as well as enabling pre-ban of one animus and ban protection for a third. The pre-ban is interesting. The ban protection, that should have already been in the game. You just, whatever your third pick character is, won't be able to be banned once you're at a certain rank or above. And then adding Hydra vouchers. I'm not sure if they're going to use this as their like paid currency or something going forward. If it's not going to be the case, then this is more going to be for people who did a rebate, because when I played GGM back, whenever that was, when we had the vouchers for the beta, when they carried over, you ended up with like just a little bit of vouchers at the end when you're done spending them all that you can't use, and you couldn't apply them to a purchase, so you just had wasted vouchers, which is essentially money, so kind of dumb. So this is hopefully going to help alleviate that problem. Alright, and the meat of what everybody wants to get into is the combats, the character changes. First off is the Animus units ascended to 5 stars and 6 stars will each gain an additional 5 points to their base speed. So once they hit 5 stars, 5 base speed. Once they hit 6 stars, another 5 base speed. So everybody collectively is going to get 10 more speed. Now without being able to kind of like get your hands dirty in the game myself, this does mean that going forward, fast units are just going to proportionally keep, or I should say exponentially keep getting better, especially when it comes to PvP, because the higher and higher that we keep bringing these numbers up, the more percentages are going to affect them. So higher speed units are going to get affected more when it comes to buffs and debuffs. When it comes to lower speed characters, this is going to affect them just like marginally less, but this does keep increasing as we start looking at units who are going to want a lot more speed. So a character who is going to build like, say like 180 speed versus a character who needs to focus on other things, so they only have a little bit extra, so they're at like 130 speed. And this is when those gaps are going to kind of widen more and more. But when it comes to PvE, this is just overall a nice little boost, especially with some changes we're going to be looking at. Chloros is getting a buff on his S3, which is cool for anybody who has Chloros. He's going to be really good for guild bosses, and this makes him even better. So, I mean, whales are definitely going to have a Chloros to help push guild boss for sure. Alright, Veronica here went through some pretty big changes, and speaking of, I'm going to be having like a reroll guide type deal coming out in a couple of days. I made that video before these patch notes came out. I think the only really big, there are a couple things I would like to change now, but the only really big thing that I think would be missing is the fact that Mio is now like one of the top targets for rerolling now for light and dark. Her and Lily are probably the top two. I'd still say Lily is top, but then Mio is like a close second. But Veronica here, pretty big changes, changing, so her ult is she steals or has a chance to steal all enemy buffs, and then she had a 50% chance to spread that to all of her allies. Insane. Veronica, just this one skill alone is kind of what makes Veronica niche and really incredible, and I really want to use her in PvP. But they change this from a 50% chance to a 100% chance, and because this is applying to your own team, unless there's going to be debuffs that affect your effect hit chance, then this should land pretty much all the time for your allies, which is great. And now the second part shouldn't really matter as much anymore. So before, it calculated each application of a buff that you've stolen, and because it was a 50% chance at the time, it did it each buff. So if you stole like 4 buffs, it would roll, it'd flip a coin 4 times. But now it's a 100% chance for everything, so it's either it's all or nothing. Yeah, Veronica, still probably not amazing in PvE, but I think PvP she's probably insanely bonkers. Mia, she's having a cooldown reduction on her skill 2, going from 5 to 4 turns. Cool. Bringing her up a little more because she is like really falling on the wayside right now. She also gets a little boost on the heal for her S3. I would have liked to have seen them bump up the Dispel she has on her S2 just a little bit, just to make that a little more consistent so she doesn't have to build as much effect hit rate, considering she is going to be a healer that scales off of HP, but, not a big deal there. Chiata's getting a little buff, buffing her S3's additional damage off of her Soul Flames from 80% to 90%. Now this is actually, any boost, especially to her S3, is pretty insane. She's a kind of a ramp unit, so over time, as she gets more buffs, this is essentially going to go down to like a 1-turn cooldown. She'll just be spamming this over and over again, so any buffs this sees is going to be pretty nuts, especially because she's already like a pretty damn good DPS. She's also probably going to be one of the best forms of applying defense breaks because of this ramp, so eventually she becomes like one of the best at breaking defense, or at least keeping it up at least. Now this is a sad day right here. Everybody's queen, Tiamat, she's been nerfed. When she enters into her ultimate form, she now will recover 20% less HP than before. That's a lot. And each stack of her bloodbath that she gains from taking damage and healing increased the healing received by 4%. It is now dropping by 1%, so down to 3%. This sounds pretty bad on paper, and realistically what this means is that she's not going to be able to self-sustain nearly as much. She's really going to need somebody else to help sustain her now, because she's no longer going to kind of get that emergency push when she transforms to kind of bring herself back up after, tanking so low. So she's going to need other forms of healing, but otherwise she's still strong. It is interesting that she took such a big hit though. I understand that she's really good in PvP, but I think you're going to see a trend here for a lot of these changes. A lot of them target some of them target characters that just aren't going to see a lot of play, I think, from the majority of the player base, or at least not many people are going to be aiming for early on. And a lot of changes to characters that most players are going to have, or that a lot of people are going to use, primarily for PvE. So the first of those underused changes is Rahu, the defense scaling monster. He's getting a buff on the S1 damage, getting a 30% boost off of his scaled defense there. And his S3 is going to increase the defense stacking percentage by 1. So instead of getting, 48% of his defense boosted, he's now going to get a 60% buff, which is 12% boost. That's kind of nutty, especially because everything of his scales off his defense. So really good there. And they also boosted how much damage he's going to, or at least the cap of damage he's going to be able to do with his basic as he scales up his wrath stacks. I think he's going to be, with these changes especially, he's just going to be an absolute menace in PvP. Ling Luo surprisingly got a buff on her skill 1, buffing up her chance of dispelling or cleansing 1 debuff up 10%. Pretty nice, especially early on. If any of these changes where you're going to see a lot of these effect chances that can already hit 100% and above, any buffs to them just means that it's going to be very, very new player friendly, and anything kind of brought underneath 50% is going to hurt a lot of characters by a lot. And then the second half is just the same percentage chance here, just if they have no debuffs, you get the Whale Prayer instead of the cleansing 1 debuff. And now Rosa, another big name that a lot of people are going to talk about. I'm going to be talking about her as well in my upcoming video. She's getting a nerf on turn meter dropping on her S1 by 2%. Not too crazy. I think this is necessary, and it just helps scale her back a little bit. So I think this one's actually a pretty fair change. I'll butcher his name, but Bornya, he's getting buffs across the board, and I like Bornya, let's just say that. So Changing his passive scaling off of his attack. So how he works is you want to build his attack, you get some HP on the side is nice, but the more attack you get, the more that scales his HP, which then also scales his attack. So they're just boosting how much he's going to get scaling off of his base attack. So very nice there, 60% increase. Love to see that. And then on his S3, he's just getting a 40% boost on his damage, which is all good. All good. Good stuff. People are going to hate him even more in PvP, but good stuff to see there. Lilith is getting a little bit of a buff on her S2, just increasing the HP scaling of her damage by 4% on her S2. And they're probably just going to, I think, continue to fine-tune characters little by little. Like Lilith is a great unit, but I assume she sees probably very little play. And so I feel like they probably want to tune her up until she's a little more even across the board with like a lot of the other big supports like Beyontin, Lily, etc. Well, maybe not the Light and Darks, but a lot of the other supports like Tsukiyomi, Kloss. Oh man, so they make this look like, so far in the patch notes, the red text has indicated buffs, and the green text has indicated nerfs. But don't be fooled here. Kloss's change is 100% a nerf, and it's fucking huge. It kind of makes Kloss, I felt like a sleeper, like fucking banger into another character. She's still solid, but this kind of really hurts her niche a lot. You can argue she was a bit overtuned, but how it worked is she stacked a unique debuff, and what that does is it like increases the damage they take, how much damage they deal, and it also decreased their speed. And because this is a unique debuff, you could stack it alongside of another speed debuff, so she was unique in that aspect that you could stack the speed down, which maybe I guess is a little too strong. So they got rid of the stacking speed at least entirely, and just gave her a generic speed down on her S3, which is pretty lame, It really, really brings her down a lot. And spoilers, I bring her up in my reroll tier list, and I thought she was pretty great. I still think she's solid. I would probably knock her down a tier or two now that she can't she can't drop speed any further than any other speed debuffer at least. So this is interesting to see. They nerfed Freya, who is their launch rate-up banner units. Now, the banner's only going on for like 9 days, so maybe they didn't care as much, but interesting to see regardless. They're nerfing her passive, which basically was if you receive buffs, anybody on your team, they would have their turn meter boosted a little bit, and when enemies are debuffed, they would have their turn meter dropped a little bit. And then those effects would be doubled if it was applied by Freya. But that was just flat. It just happened no matter what. So now they've actually created it, or made it so it's a 70% chance at least on the turn meter knockback. So interesting to see there. It doesn't change much, but I feel like she's going to need that effect hit rate a little more than she did before at least. But yeah, just interesting to see them nerfing the launch rate up. Turandot got a nerf. She was one of the few SRs that saw some play. I don't honestly know a lot about Turandot, so her S2 had a 30% chance to push back the turn meter by 30%. Okay, so it's just another, they did a lot of these like kind of, what is it called? It's called like a blanket numbers pass, where they did a lot of these turn meter changes where they just dropped them all by a bit. So hers is being dropped by 5% here. Next up we have Chiaki. This is the regular, I think she's red SR Chiaki, not Chiaki the Echo, which is a supporting character. So this is the healer. And it looks like, again, they're doing another numbers pass with the heal. So just across the board, all of her healing is going up a bit in percentage, which I guess makes a bit more sense now why... I guess that's not really an adjacent buff, but yeah, she's just getting a numbers pass, getting all of her heals buffed. So I guess just trying to make some of the lesser healers a little more relevant. And Dina, this is one of the other big... I would say free-to-play hits, really. Dina's an incredibly strong, fantastic SR that anybody should have been building. This one, at least, I do feel like is part of the overall turn meter numbers pass, because again, it is just reducing turn meter application, so reducing her turn meter steal by 10% on her S1, and then reducing the turn meter gain by 4% off of consuming erosion stacks. So she applies those, and then somebody crits an enemy with the erosion stacks, it gets consumed, then you get a little bit of turn meter back and you deal some true damage. So yeah, it just looks like another reduction there. Kraken getting nerfed here is probably necessary, but also just a little silly for me. This hurts mostly early game, a lot of free-to-play players. And it's just interesting that they're like, oh, by the way, Mio's coming out, and she kind of does what he does a little bit as well. So, you know, just get Mio instead. But reducing the percentage chance that he's going to have to land knocking back on turn meter, and applying freeze on his S3, his ult. So dropping that by 10% on the turn knockback, and dropping it 10% as well on the freeze. So dropping it down to 65 and 50%. This does mean for PvE you can still hit 100%. It's just going to be harder early on for free-to-plays, especially, to be able to get to a reasonable or a good percentage to actually land these debuffs. Also 90%, sorry, not 100%. 90%, that's the important threshold you at least need to hit for PvE, and then probably a little more past that, depending on effect resistance on different enemies. So yeah, it looks like right here with some nerfs to Sonya, it looks like those buffs to Chiaki really were just because people were, or too many people were using Sonya instead of diversifying and using Chiaki more, so they're trying to nerf her a bit. They're dropping heals on her passive a little bit. The big thing here is, I think most people didn't realize this was a bug. She would passively heal while she was CC'd, but apparently that was a bug and not a feature, so she will no longer heal while under CC. So yeah, rip to Sonya havers. Just build Dorothy, I guess. Oh, this one hurts. This one hurts. The king of the game, Marvel. I don't know how to say his name. He's been nerfed. He's been nerfed, and he's been nerfed by quite a bit. So first off, the turn meter steal percentage, the chance to hit it, has been dropped by 10, so from 50% to 40. And the reduction of the turn meter stolen, which was a quarter of turn meter, is now reduced to 15%. That's really big, especially, again, when it comes to PvE, when there's like one enemy, you're spamming them down, everything else is on cooldown, which after this change, they're going to be on cooldown for a while. It means that you're not going to be knocking them back nearly as much and not nearly as hard. So this one is a pretty significant hit. This opens up other alternatives now. Instead of raining Marvel, he's still going to be like a solid unit that you should be taking, and he's still going to help you tremendously just overall how his kit synergizes and works together. But all these number drops are very big hits, and is going to make it a lot harder for free-to-play players to progress into the end game. And then the other big change on his S3 is, again, dropping the turn meter knockback by 10% from 50 to 40 as well. And this is like the most reasonable one, I think, of the changes, is dropping the cooldown. It doesn't say anything else, so I'm going to assume it's just his S3, dropping the cooldown by 1 turn. Oh, yeah, from 4 to 5. Yeah, so the S3. So it's now going to be on a 5-turn cooldown. That's insanely long. But it might have been necessary because with the combination of certain characters and different shells, you may have potentially, especially as we progress forward in the game, been able to kind of loop Marvel and loop his ult. So this is probably the most necessary change out of the rest of it. But the rest of this really just, it just hurts free-to-play players, but it should also make it so we see less of him in PvP. But I feel like people shouldn't care about seeing him in PvP anymore. This kind of just helped like free-to-play players, like, I don't know, build like cleave teams, build you know, speed pushing teams a little easier, because whales are now just going to play Lily and Mio, and Marvel maybe, but he's probably just gonna be dropped. So why don't we pour one out for Marvel? Let's crack open a second one to pour out for Victor, another free-to-play nuking monster. Victor, I know he was like kind of terrorizing PvP a bit, so probably again some necessary changes, but his passive, for every 10% HP lost, increased damage by 15%, dropping that down now to 9%. That's huge. Now, one thing I didn't personally know about this is whether or not this stacked at all, but because it's not like an actual buff, I believe this wouldn't have stacked, so it's just like a real-time check of what his HP is at. So at cap, if I'm understanding right, it should cap out at 90% HP lost, which means that at cap, it would have done a 135% damage buff, which is now nerfed down to a measly 81 at cap. That's a 54% drop-off. That's almost a 50% drop-off entirely on his damage. That one's pretty nuts. I didn't build Deeding or Victor. I just know of how crazy they were. I know a lot of people are doing like one-shot type builds with Victor. And I guess people are saying now that they're just going to stick with Deeding instead, which makes sense. Hopefully Victor is still going to be strong, but I feel like with this huge-ass nerf, he's not going to be nearly as relevant as he was. Alright, the last of the character changes is Dorothy. She had a bug where apparently on auto her S2 wouldn't cast, so that's fixed. Cool. And then the final one is arguably the only usable rare unit, Researcher number 41, or S3, that boosted allies turn meter by 35%, was now dropped to 20%. So again, another one of those turn meter passes. It's just weird that they would hit this rare character when she didn't do a whole lot much else. So there's one niche that she kind of like not excelled in, but was like genuinely useful, is now just has been gimped. It's still usable, but really it's not. Just use something else. At least now, just use something else. All right, shell changes. So these ones I am not as intimately familiar with, so I'm kind of just going to read them as is and then kind of give my opinion on the changes there alone. I'm not nearly as familiar as I was with the characters. So White Fang, he buffs crit on whoever he's equipped to, and he also did some damage, and they are now reducing that damage by 30%. But after looking him over, I think the big thing that is really huge for him, especially, I feel like I say this a lot, especially when it comes to PvE, when you crit, it boosts your crit damage up to 60%, and because this wasn't changed at least, I still think that this is mostly fine. This is probably more for like PvP as far as like leaving off just a little bit of damage that you needed to finish off. So not nerfing this big gimmick here, I think is very good, but yeah, definitely still weaker there. So next up is Artisan, which is, applies shields, does a little bit of defense buffing. Essentially just scales off of shield. So my first thought process of them nerfing it is this would be something for like tankier units like Rahu. Maybe Tiamat, because this can apply like brambles or give brambles points, so that way you can run the brambles set. So it'd make them a bit beefier, harder to kill off, but mostly probably Rahu is my opinion. They're dropping the shield from 440 to 400, so a 40% drop there. That doesn't seem too crazy to me. There's now this additional part though, cannot stack with similar effects applied by other shells, so we can't stack shields, which it's probably fine. I mean, I don't know how it worked, if people were actually stacking like big thick ass shields or not, but I feel like you probably don't want that going on, at least for the future health of the game. So those seem like fine changes to me. Codex of Magic, I think this is the biggest one here. This is one that even I'm familiar with this. I think he was involved in like the whole looping thing. So how Codex worked is that it would cast its skill, and that skill would buff speed, and it would make the next casted skill on the equipped character not reset its cooldown, so it wouldn't even go off, or it wouldn't even consider it going off, so you'd then be able to do like a skill 3, and then do another skill 3 the next turn. But they've now changed it slightly, so that Codex of Magic itself, its skills cannot have its CD reduced. So there are certain characters who are able to reduce cooldowns. They'll usually specify if they can only do Animus, or it'll just say like allies, so that would be for Animus and shells. And you could essentially just loop some ults, potentially with enough speed, turn push and whatnot, and reducing Codex of Magic's cooldown there to keep looping that, and then get into some infinite S3s, which is probably a big no-no as far as any health of any game is concerned. So looks like they got rid of any potential looping future. And now same thing with Amber. Basically it helped you survive getting killed, so that's on a long cooldown. They didn't want that dropping, so that way you could try and make an undying unit off of just a bunch of cooldown in one shell alone. We had a bug fix happen with Halloween, and then the last two are actually gold shells. Interesting to see, Twilight Knight being one of the first ones that you should get when you get into gold shells. Just reducing the amount of damage it deals by 40%. Okay, that seems fine. At least you're still getting the somewhat large defense reduction there. And then Diamond Heart, another shielding shell. Just dropping the shield again and giving it that same little tag. Cannot stack with similar effects. So it looks like they just didn't want you to stack Diamond Heart and Artisan here. So no stacking shields for anybody. Although that does sound fun. And then there's a bunch of adjustments here. I don't think there's anything that's too big that I think I would want to go over. If you want to check this all out again, take a look for it yourself. I think I've went over all of the big ones though. There was one thing actually with Union. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here it is. Adjusted the maximum daily check-in frequency. I think this is the last thing I wanted to go over is what the fuck does this mean? Adjust the maximum daily check-in frequency? I don't want to check in multiple times throughout the day. Just to say I was here in my guild, so I really hope that's not what that is. It's unclear, so we'll find out in a few days. But I really hope not. Alright, yeah, that looks like it's about it. Overall, I think a lot of this looks like really bad changes. But I think that this is a lot of changes that is going to be more for the future health of PvP. The shell changes I don't think were too huge. Again, I think most of the shell changes are all pretty healthy. The character changes, again, it does seem like it's more for the health of the game, but it's interesting that you don't see any light and dark SSRs, which are by and far considered some of the best characters. Not only because they are, you know, somewhat element neutral when it comes to most content, but because they are all just genuinely very strong. So it's going to be interesting to see that they don't balance change them now and how they're going to approach that in the future. Because I know at least in like Epic 7, when they made big changes to like the highest rarity moonlights, you know, big units, they ended up having to like give out like free resets on characters, or you were able to get like selectors to exchange for an equivalent character when they ended up eventually getting nerfed. So I think they're going to have to really tiptoe the line there and see how that works, because as we get deeper, we might start seeing some things that may or may not have been addressed here. So interesting to see that, and that most of the free-to-play units that were going to help carry a lot of people have now been hit, you know. Tiamat got hit. Who else is here? It's mostly SRs. Dina got hit. Kraken got hit. Sonya, not as big of a hit. This is more just until you get your Ling Luo, but interesting. She got hit. Marvel obviously got hit. Victor got hit. And then I don't think many people were building Researcher number 41, but still, it's like, again, one of the only useful rares, and she got hit. So yeah, right now I'm lukewarm on these changes. They seem targeted, but maybe it's not that bad. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that these changes are mostly fine. We'll see as we get into launch, and I think what we're really going to see is once we get to the next balance patch, where their head is as far as any other future changes are. So let me know what you think of all the changes. Comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.